Mr. Speaker. I rise to pay a tribute to a good friend and a former colleague who passed away this past week, a true trailblazer, former Congresswoman Geraldine Ferraro. She's one of the few people in history who can lay claim to being a first. She was the first woman to be nominated for vice president on a major ticket, and also the first Italian American to achieve that honor. She was a leader, an advocate, a devoted public servant, and beloved family member. I'm also honored most of all to have been able to call her a friend. The history that has unfolded after she stood on the stage in San Francisco in 1984 to accept her party's nomination for vice president has happened thanks to her taking those first steps. I remember being there at the convention in San Francisco in 1984, and how proud we were that one of our own, a New Yorker, Jerry Ferraro, was being nominated as vice president. At the same time, our governor at the time, another New Yorker, Mario Cuomo, gave the keynote address at that convention. Since that time, of course, another woman has appeared on the ballot, major party for vice president, and another came within a handful of delegates of becoming the first presidential nominee. Strong women in politics and business are not the exception any longer, they're mainstream. As Jerry declared in San Francisco, quote, "I stand before you to proclaim tonight, America is the land where dreams can come true for all of us." Jerry grew up as I did in New York City, and went into teaching before going to law school as I did, and grew up in the South Bronx as a young person, as I did as well. She headed the new Special Victims Bureau of the Queens County District Attorney's Office and was a Queens criminal prosecutor before being elected to the House of Representatives in 1978. While serving in the House, she created a flex-time program for public employees, which has become the basis of such programs in the private sector. She also successfully sponsored the Women's Economic Equality Act, which ended pension discrimination against women, provided job options for displaced homemakers, and enabled homemakers to open IRAs. You know, when I think of Jerry Ferraro, I think of her as a typical representative of the middle class in New York's outer boroughs. She had a certain kind of combination of street smarts and book smarts and a certain kind of sense and moxie, knowing how to get ahead and what to say. We're all better off, no question. America is a better place because of the accomplishments of Jerry Ferraro. Women from coast to coast are better off because of her, but all Americans, women or not, are better off because of what she did. She took those first steps in 1984 when she was nominated. 64 years after women won the right to vote, a woman had removed the men-only sign from the White House door. I thought it would be good at this point to read some of the things that the New York Times had mentioned about the highlights of Jerry Ferraro. She was considered very ideal for television, a down-to-earth, streaked blonde, peanut butter sandwich-making mother whose personal story resonated powerfully. Brought up by a single mother who had crocheted beads on wedding dresses to send her daughter to good schools, Miss Ferraro had waited until her own children were school-aged before going to work in the Queens District Attorney's Office. In the 1984 race, many Americans found her breezy style refreshing. "What are you, crazy?" was one of her familiar expressions. She might break into a little dance behind the speaker's platform when she liked the introductory music. Jerry Ferraro, Geraldine Ann Ferraro, was born on August 26, 1935, in the Hudson River city of Newburgh, New York, where she was the fourth child and only daughter of Dominic Ferraro, an Italian immigrant who owned a restaurant and a five-and-dime store, and the former Antonetta L. Corriere. One brother died shortly after birth, and another, Gerard, died in an automobile accident when he was 3, 2 years before Geraldine was born. Geraldine was born at home. Her mother, who had been holding Gerard at the time of the crash and who had washed and pressed his clothes for months after his death, would not go to the hospital for the delivery and leave the third brother, Carl, at home. Geraldine was named for Gerard, but in her book, Framing a Life, a family memoir, written with Catherine Whitney, Ms. Ferraro said her mother had emphasized that she was not taking his place. "Jerry is special," she quoted her mother as saying, "because she is a girl." Her mother soon sold the store and the family's house and moved to the South Bronx. With the proceeds from the sale of property in Italy that her husband had left her, she sent Geraldine to the Marymount School, a Catholic boarding school in Tarrytown, New York. She sent Carl to military school. Tarrytown, New York is part of my district. Miss Ferraro's outstanding grades earned her a scholarship to Marymount College in Tarrytown, from which she transferred to the school's Manhattan branch. She commuted there from Queens, where her mother had moved by then. An English major, Miss Ferraro was editor of the school newspaper and an athlete, and won numerous honors before graduating in 1956. "Delights in the unexpected," the yearbook said about her. After graduating, Miss Ferraro got a job teaching in a public grade school in Queens. She later applied to Fordham Law School, where an admissions officer warned her that she might be taking a man's place. Admitted to its night school, she was one of only 2 women in a class of 179 and received her law degree in 1960. Miss Ferraro and John Zaccaro, whose family was in the real estate business, were married on July 16, 1960, 2 days after she passed the bar exam. She was admitted to the New York State Bar in 1961 and decided to keep her maiden name professionally to honor her mother. She was admitted to the United States Supreme Court Bar in 1978. For the first 13 years of her marriage, Miss Ferraro devoted herself mainly to her growing family. Donna was born in 1962, John in 1964, and Laura in 1966. Miss Ferraro did some legal work for her husband's business, worked pro bono for Women in Family Court, and dabbed in local politics. In 1970, she was elected president of the Queens County Women's Bar Association. In 1973, after her cousin Nicholas Ferraro was elected Queens District Attorney, she applied for and got a job as an assistant district attorney in charge of a Special Victims Bureau, investigating rape, crimes against the elderly, and child and wife abuse. The cases were so harrowing, she later wrote, that they caused her to develop an ulcer, and the crime-breeding societal condition she saw, she said, planted the seeds of her liberalism. When she was elected to the House, she became very good friends with Tip O'Neill, who was the Speaker. Miss Ferraro found her opportunity in 1978 to run for Congress when James Delaney, a Democratic congressman from a predominantly working-class district in Queens, announced his retirement. In the House, Miss Ferraro was on the Public Works and Transportation Committee, and in doing that, she successfully pushed for improved mass transit around LaGuardia Airport. Mr. O'Neill, Tip O'Neill, the Speaker, took an immediate liking to her, and in her 3 terms, she voted mostly with the party's leadership. Her friendship with Mr. O'Neill, because of him, she was elected Secretary of the Democratic Caucus, thanks in part to him, giving her influence on committee assignments, and in 1983 she was awarded a seat on the House Budget Committee. It was Miss Ferraro's appointment as chairwoman of the 1984 Democratic Platform Committee that gave her the most prominence. In her book, Ferraro, My Story, she said that in becoming the first woman to hold that post, she owed much to a group of Democratic women, congressional staffers, rights activists, labor leaders, and others who called themselves Team A and who lobbied for her appointment. Now, when she was running, there were a lot of slights, being the first woman. People were either adjusting or not adjusting to a woman on a national ticket. Mississippi's agriculture secretary called Miss Ferraro young lady and asked if she could bake blueberry muffins, to which Miss Ferraro said, "Yes, I can. Can you?" Jerry Ferraro always had a smile and always had a kind word and never said no to someone needing her help. Even though I came to the House 4 years after she left, I got to know her very well and truly feel a loss in having her pass away. Near the end of 1998, she learned that she had multiple myeloma, a bone marrow cancer that suppresses the immune system. Before then, she was later ambassador to the United States Human Rights Commission during the Clinton administration, and we remember her as co-host of the CNN program Crossfire. from 1996 to 1998. She wrote books and articles and did business consulting. She addressed her place in history in a long letter to the Times in 1988, noting that women wrote to her about how she had inspired them to take on challenges. Quote, always adding a version of, I decided if you could do it, I can too. Schoolgirls, she said, told her they hoped to be president someday and needed advice. Jerry Ferraro said, I'm the first to admit that, were I not a woman, I would not have been the vice presidential nominee. But she insisted that her presence on the ticket had translated into votes that the ticket might otherwise have not received. In any event, she said, the political realities of 1984 had made it all but impossible for the Democrats to win that year, no matter what the candidates or their gender. Quote, throwing Ronald Reagan out of office at the height of his popularity, with inflation and interest rates down, the economy moving, and the country at peace, would have required God on the ticket, Miss Ferraro wrote, and she was not available. Geraldine Ferraro is survived by her husband, 3 children, and 8 grandchildren. I must say that I was disappointed that in the House we didn't have a plane to take all the members to the funeral yesterday. I'm sorry about that because, frankly, I think it was a bit disrespectful. But we all remember Jerry Ferraro. We remember her as a true New Yorker. We remember her as a true American. And we remember her as someone who, each of us, she inspired to push on with whatever goal we want to achieve, no matter how daunting or impossible it looked. That's how I'll remember Jerry Ferraro. I'll remember her at the 1984 convention, standing on the stage with Walter Mondale, both putting their arms around each other, and even then there was question about how they would interact, as it was the first time a woman was on a national ticket. I will miss my friend Jerry. We will all miss her, but we are all better people because of her. Rest in peace, Jerry. We will always remember you, and so will the history books. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.